My guest on this week's episode of Suds and Search is Purna Virji, Senior Content Marketing Evangelist for LinkedIn. Purna is one of the most popular and recognizable personalities in paid media. In 2019, Purna was awarded the U.S. Search Personality of the Year award. She is a mainstay on PPC Hero's list of the top 25 PPC influencers in the world. In 2016, PPC Hero named Purna the most influential PPC marketer in the world. For many years, Purna served as Microsoft's brand ambassador to the PPC community. She left that role in the fall of 2020, but stayed in the Microsoft family by joining LinkedIn. I'm going to start our conversation asking her about how the transition's going. Purna is a leading conference presenter and frequent keynoter. It's hard to think of a digital marketing conference she hasn't spoken at. A very, very short list of the conferences you might have heard Purna present includes Pubcon, Brighton, Mozcon, and many of the different SMX events. I'm going to ask her about a recent presentation she did at In Orbit titled Building Breakthrough Content for LinkedIn. In the talk, Purna describes what differentiates a LinkedIn user from users on other platforms, and she gives a lot of actionable tips for how to reach this audience. Purna is also a leading blogger and educator. During her time at Microsoft, she helped prepare a white paper on inclusive marketing titled Your Get Started Guide to Inclusive Marketing. I'm going to ask Purna about the ebook, which was truly excellent. After you're done listening to this interview, there's a link to the ebook in the show notes. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Purna Virji, one of the leading voices in paid media today. We'll chat about how to make your content stand out on LinkedIn, a concept called Inattentional amnesia, and I'll ask Purna about how breaking both her arms changed the way she does searches. All right, Purna Virji, welcome to Suds and Search. How you doing?
I am doing great. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. This is a big get for us. I wanted to start. I've known you for years as Microsoft's one of their most recognizable ambassadors. You took a new job in the fall, but kept it in the family. You're still over at LinkedIn. Your job title is Content Marketing Evangelist for LinkedIn. Tell us about the transition to your new role and how it's been going.
It's been amazing. Like everything that you hear about LinkedIn, like all the great things, it is 10 times better than what you've heard, I promise. And I love that I'm still part of the Microsoft family. Like I joke, I say like I drink the Kool-Aid, like I believe everything. Like I am such a fan of like Satya Nadella and his vision and how he's transformed the company. So for me, when it was time, like I'd been in my role for like close to 6 years, and I was looking at what's next, and this role at LinkedIn just came up at the best time ever. It was exactly where I wanted to go next. It's what I was passionate about. Like I said, I love people and understanding what resonates with them and why they take actions and how can we use content to convince them and take action. And so this is exactly, for me personally, it's the best role I could be in.
Well, wonderful. Well, I wanted to ask you about a presentation you did for In Orbit, which was a virtual conference. The title of it was Building Breakthrough Content for LinkedIn. And I thought it was a great presentation and I learned a lot from it. So I thought maybe our audience would as well. One of the main questions you pose at the beginning is our content cutting through the noise or adding to the noise? And I think maybe a good place to start is the mindset of a LinkedIn member. So it's different than the other, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. These are different than LinkedIn. How would you describe the mindset of a typical LinkedIn member?
So I would say there's a couple of things that differentiate the LinkedIn member. Like the first thing is just how trusted LinkedIn is as a platform, and like that plays a big role into it. People want to put their best professional foot forward, and what they tend to think about LinkedIn as it's a place for them to invest their time. Like they're coming to LinkedIn to learn, to grow, to fulfill both their professional but also personal aspirations. And so what we tend to see on LinkedIn is that tips and tricks and trends tend to form like the bedrock of engagement. Like people want to learn. And so if you can go out there and help people with their goals, you really tied in well with them.
Yeah, so I like this very much. And you did this differential. You looked at the trending topics in LinkedIn versus the trending topics on Twitter. Twitter was kind of like almost tabloidish was what's going on in the world of sports and news and everything like that. If I were to look at trending topics in LinkedIn, one of the things that was interesting is it was about building yourself professionally and personally. So how can I get better at, supporting working parents at my company. You might find that information at LinkedIn. I wonder what would you say to people who are having trouble doing what you said, breaking through the noise? What advice could you give them to break through the noise and actually stand out on LinkedIn?
So the number one piece of advice is like this very small mindset shift. Like we always tend to start with what do I want to say? Like what do I need to promote? Where just shift it to what do they want to hear? Like what's going to resonate with them? And where are they in their sort of decision journey stage? Most of us like to think about it in terms of the funnel, which is a great concept. But if we boil it down to its simplicity, it's how can we align content to intent? Like, are people looking to learn more about the problem, about the solutions, about, your company as a whole? Or are they looking for more action type content where it is like, how do they work with you? Like, what are your offers? How do they set it up? And people go back and forth between the different stages. So you just want to be there as often as possible. We recommend like once a week on average, once a day, ideally, 2-3 times a week on average. If you can post on LinkedIn, that even does better because you'll get engagement. And then post that out there. Like think about your audience. Where are they in their stage? What are they most looking to know at that time? And be there. There's awesome stats that I just came across. It was from like this Forrester and Google study that showed that 90% of the decision journey in B2B is often made before they contact a vendor.
No kidding.
And people on average will look at 13 pieces of content in that process. So if all of these decisions are being made before, it is your content that is going to be your best representative. It is going to be the thing that people can use to form their decision. So are you out there? Is your content representing you in the best way possible? Is it convincing people to want to even just put you on their short list? That's important to think about.
Well, awesome. And I think all of those are good tips. And then one of the things that whenever I think about social media, something you talk about is how to stop people's thumbs from scrolling on the screen. So how to stop thumbs. And you had a number of suggestions, and I wonder if I could take you through those one by one if you're up for it. One of the things I thought was, this is a gutsy one, but I liked it. So if I want to stop thumbs, take a contrarian approach. That can be an effective way to stop thumbs. Can you give us an example of where being a contrarian has worked well?
Oh, absolutely. And like the whole thing is about being disruptive because, I say this all the time because I looked at these stats. One, these days, we're all spending on average like 8 hours on our phones. And in those 8 hours, we're scrolling through 300 feet of content. And even if you have the best ad with the right targeting, all of that, if it's not stopping people from scrolling past you, then it's all moot, isn't it? Right. So your content needs to get people to stop and want to pay attention. And this kind of disruptive, contrarian approach, like be unexpected, is that's your hook, right? The more unexpected it is, the more people will stop and pay attention.
Yeah.
If we had to think about a human version, it's Gary V, isn't it?
Right.
Like he is, people either love him or hate him. But, the fact that he's contrarian and he's going out there, talking about different views is a big reason why he's well known. And that can help you stand out. My sister team at LinkedIn called the B2B Institute, like every year they put out marketing trends. And LinkedIn's not the only company that puts out marketing trends once a year, like so many people do. But how do you stand out? They do a contrarian take on them. So they'll come up with challenges like why broad targeting is not a good idea. Things that go against conventional wisdom, and then they back it up with facts and insights, and it makes people want to read. Yeah. Or it can be an example of just a different way of approaching creative, like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. They are a B2B SaaS company. That's their audience. If you look at those ad creatives and everything, it's rational, fact-based, sea of sameness almost. They created their monster, the IT monster campaign, which is this like red, super fun monster. And they used that persona, that character in their TV ads, LinkedIn, across all the different channels. And it engaged with people. It was something that stood out. And you'd almost think like, why should, we're Hewlett Packard, we're a serious company, like, a red monster.
Yeah. Well, I love this idea. Disrupt with unexpectedness is something I wanted to ask you. And I wanted to ask you about the Hewlett Packard IT monster. So this is perfect. But one of the things about LinkedIn I can think of is that it's professional. I want to wear a shirt and tie and a sport coat when I'm on there, look nice. But you need to have your personality shine through. And you've talked about using humor. So the IT monster can be a little bit silly. It can be a little bit different. How have you seen humor work to kind of stop thumbs or make for effective content on LinkedIn?
Also, humor is serious business. The humor works. It's so relatable. People want to. And it also, research has shown that humor actually helps things be more memorable in your head. And it also allows brands to build that memorability, right? There's all this research, like numerous studies show this, that for consumers, like B2C, people have to engage with your creatives 5 to 7 times before they remember you. In B2B, it's like 10, 11 plus times before they remember you. And there's a study by Gartner that shows like 71% of people will rate you almost the same as your competitors. So if your brands are not as distinctive as we tend to think they are, so one ways we can stand out is through personality, and humor is a really good way to show personality because it is engaging. And it helps humanize the brand. And people are not just one facet, right? Yes, we are professional, but we're also like warm, beating heart humans behind that professional image too. And both types of content work really well on LinkedIn. Like people want to see the whole self. They want to see the whole brand. Like think about startups that have used personality and humor well. It's like Lemonade is one of my favorites. They're the insurance company as a startup. Insurance, such a crowded space, such a busy space. But then like Lemonade will come out with their quirky creatives. They'll be, they want to share advice on 7 tips to look at before buying a house. They'll post it, like make sure you look at all the pictures to make sure you're uncovering any like backyard cemeteries or demonic rooms, unless that's your jam. Like it's just so funny. Or when they're talking about life insurance, they're like, common sense advice is that, don't talk about money or debt. So here's what we're going to do, talk about money and debt. And it's funny, it's engaging. You're like, okay, I get it. Lemonade. Now you're stuck in my head. I remember those creatives and I saw them like 3 weeks ago, but they're still in my head in a way. So that just helps. So use it. Do not be afraid. There's so many brands that do it so well, and a simple way to find it. Go on LinkedIn, go on the app, scroll, see what stops you in the tracks.
Yeah, I love that tip. I think I have 2 others that I want to ask you about real quickly. So one this is my favorite case study of them all. The tip is put a new spin on old formats, and it came from Barilla Pasta of all people. They had a partnership with Spotify where you could start a playlist, and the playlist would end in exactly the amount of time it took to make spaghetti or linguine or farfalle, whatever pasta you chose. What a great idea. How does this putting a new spin on old formats play into this?
Oh, it's such a good idea, right? Yeah. So I love that example so much too, because it's just a different way to put Barilla's name front and center. Even people are on Spotify all the time and like, oh, how do we get in on that? It's fantastic. I would always challenge people, like look at existing platforms, creative ad formats, and find a different way. Another really good example is from Johnson & Johnson. Yeah. Now, all the social media formats, everybody has a live. So you've got LinkedIn Live, Instagram Live, Facebook Live. Everyone has a live. And what's common across all of them is that most brands, companies, marketers, we tend to think of it as a very one-off. It's an event, and then your event's done. But Johnson & Johnson was like, it's not an event. It can be like a TV documentary series approach. And that's how they used it. They created episodic content that they did via lives, and they called it Road to the Vaccine, and it sort of featured experts, insights behind the scenes into J&J's vaccine creation. So amazing content, very interesting. But as a marketer, I'm like, it's more interesting how they even packaged it. So they would treat it as a content franchise. Before every quote unquote episode, they would send out emails to be like, don't forget, tune in at this time. After the live, they would send, here's an episode recap. It was so polished and kept the brand top of mind. And it was a simple, free format. Live. It was so easy to do. And anyone could replicate that.
Wonderful. And I want to take just a quick step back. You introduced me to a term at the beginning of that presentation called inattentional amnesia, which is about, despite seeing something a lot of times, you fail to create a lasting memory of it. My favorite example of this was, I interact with Google every day, 8 hours a day. I'm Googling all the time. And you said, what is the color of the second letter in Google's logo? And I went, I have no idea. I could not remember at all. It's clear to anyone in marketing that building affinity for your brand is incredibly important. What role does this inattentional amnesia play into this brand building?
It's so much, right? It just goes back to the people's inability to differentiate you from your competitors, or just to build that brand recall in the first place. And that's what's important, right? If you think about the top of mind, you talk about like brand awareness, so like how many neurons a brand has in the head of somebody. Yeah, fame is at the top, which is like Coca-Cola fame, which is the brand that's talked about in many different situations. Everyone knows it. It's part of like movies, pop culture. But the sweet spot is salience, which is when you know of the brand and you think about it at the right time. So let's say I'm looking for car insurance because of Geico's Gecko memorable commercials that they've done over time. Now, when I'm looking to buy car insurance, like Geico pops in my head. So now I'm more likely to give them business because I think about them. And then you have sort of awareness at the bottom of that brand awareness function where they just know you exist, but they may not think about you at the right time. So you need to get awareness, but also move people into salience. So you want to be associated with buying at the right time. And so that's where building that brand distinctiveness and overcoming that inattentional amnesia can help. And if I can give one tip for how to do that, it can be through like visual consistency. Like very often, people use stock images. There's a lot of commoditization where ads and creatives will look the same. But put in like, what's your distinctive brand DNA? Is it like color? Is it your logo? Is it a saying? Put that in every sort of visual place, whether it's a display ad, whether it's your image ad on LinkedIn, whether it is, MSAN ad on Microsoft, whatever the platform, if it's visual, reinforce it. And a brand that does it really well is EY, so Ernst & Young. Every single visual will have their, I forget what the shape is called. It's sort of this rhombus, I think, but I may be wrong. Sorry, but this is a yellow color or shape, and it's in every creative that they have. And I completely failed remembering the shape, so my geometry teacher is going to be very mad if they're watching. But yeah, do that. Like that, the easier they can recall your creative, the easier they'll recall your brand later.
Unbelievable. So all this is great. We're talking about the importance of logos and branding, what the specific audience on LinkedIn. But before long, the rubber is going to need to meet the road, and we need to actually create some content. We'll need some inspiration, perhaps. We'll need some ideas. We'll need to ideate. Where do you think people should start when they're thinking about content on LinkedIn?
The first step, I should say, is that people need to make sure they're balancing like brand and demand. So think about content along the full funnel. And the reason I say this is because there's an independent studies like by IPA that found that when you can do a mix of brand and demand, you can get up to 5 times the conversion rate than just brand or demand alone. So balance that, because brand, you're always going to plant seeds and then you're going to nurture the seeds. So keep both going. And so start with that. Then you want to sort of think about at every stage of the funnel, what's the mindset that my audience is in? So if it's top of funnel, probably right now you're unknown to them, or maybe they're just trying to figure out what they need, what the issues are, and you're trying to build brand recognition. So think about, hey, maybe for brand recognition, I can build emotional hooks through personality, through humor, through that, or I'm trying to reinforce my brand through consistency. Then if I think like mid-funnel, like nurture, so important, right? Here's they're trying to be like, figure out the problem, figure out what the solutions are. So now they're sort of trying to get into who they should go with. Here's your time where you can stand out by showcasing your expertise. So showcase your products, do demos, like help them show how to associate your brand with the solution to their problems. And then sort of bottom funnel is when they're trying to make the decision now. So they've got their short list, they want to choose you. You can stand out by social proof, right? That I'll have what she's having, as Meg Ryan trained as well, at case studies. And here's where you think about your conversion experiences. Like, are you eliminating the friction? Like, what are those things that we can do to make it easy for them to choose you? So that's what I start. Start with your audience mindset, where they could be, plan content. And it's not as overwhelming as people might think, right? If you can just plan out your content calendar to be like, am I hitting different phases? And then it's much simpler to do.
Wonderful. Well, I want to see if we can shift gears here a little bit to something you were involved in your previous role at Microsoft. And this has to do with inclusive marketing and accessible marketing. Some of these topics that you presented at conferences that I thought were so extraordinary. Hope you're up for this, but this is a great topic because it makes sense from a business and bottom line perspective. And it also makes sense from a personal, this is the right thing to do perspective. For people who are listening, maybe they aren't familiar with accessible marketing, they didn't read the ebook. What are we talking about here?
So it's a few different ways to think about it, right? If you want to be able to reach as many people as you can, A, business standpoint, but B, you also don't want to leave people behind. Like, why unintentionally, and for most brands, it is unintentional. You could be excluding people. So you want to think about what are the different facets and aspects of inclusion. Like, accessibility is one of the ways that you can think about and get started on. It's very easy to action on your website, in your presentations, but it also could be people's learning styles, content consumption styles. It could be preferences. And I think it's easier to talk about through examples. One, if you're trying to reach different audiences, even start looking at your job descriptions and the words that you use. There's awesome studies that LinkedIn has posted about, how the different words you use appeal differently to male and female. So like there's certain, if you're like, aggressive goals and targets, that dissuades women, but it also makes men more likely to apply. So if you're like, hey, why am I getting so few women in my pipeline? Or maybe I'm only having men because I'm getting so few women. It's like, look at the words, look at the terminologies you use. It's something so small and simple.
That's a great example.
It's even in the images, like the visuals. If you're trying to, very often brands want to do the right thing, but sometimes they'll be like, oh, picture of person on wheelchair on my website. Check, I'm done it. Now everyone knows I'm inclusive, but it's not, right? It has to make sense. If you are showcasing different people of different backgrounds, communities, sizes, ages, make sure they are reflected in creative throughout. Even if we're doing a PowerPoint presentation, something I try to do is make sure, like, do I have images that represent diverse groups and backgrounds of people? Small things help people be seen, feel seen and included. So in terms of accessibility, think about the color combination, right? Somebody who may have color blindness, for example, may not be able to read the website. Are you having your simple SEO best practices, right? Are you having your what's your H1, what's that? Your content hierarchy and your HTML helps for those readers to read it out in the right order, and also helps for your SEO too. Like small things. It's so karmic. If you try to do the best to reach and appeal to people, like, you will get rewarded, because it will help with some other best practices too. And make sure you're including your target audiences in the group while making it. A brand who does that really well, like Tommy Hilfiger, they created this adaptive line of clothing where they thought they have like shirts with magnetic buttons. So if you have, some difficulty with mobility or using your hands, it's a lot simpler. Or maybe if you only have one hand, it's a lot simpler to do. Or Target, what they did, they created very often children who may be diagnosed to be on this autism spectrum, they may have sensory issue, sensitivities are common for certain groups of people and children. And so things like a simple tag that we take for granted on a t-shirt may be really bothersome. Yeah. So they came out with their sensory friendly line of clothing that actually take out the tags. And it helps them, but it helps everyone else, because it actually feels so much nicer when there's no tags, because we're like, that's a bit annoying really, and when it's gone. So if it's authentic and it resonates with one audience, it's really likely to resonate with broader audiences.
I think this is such a good point. I was blown away by this scale. So the enormity of this surprised me. So you said something like 1 in 5 people have some sort of disability, or maybe a better way to phrase that is, there are really over 1 billion people who are experiencing disabilities. And so that's the enormity of the audience that you could be reaching. I think it's worth underscoring that point.
Yes, and it could be, some people it might be a permanent disability. Sometimes it's even temporary or situational. For example, those adaptive shirts, it could help somebody maybe who is maybe missing an arm, so like permanently they don't have one. But it also could be somebody who's situational, like where they're holding a baby, they're a new parent, they're holding a baby, they only have one arm. It can be helpful. So if sometimes companies are like, but there's only X number of people this could reach, I'm like, no, it's not. It's, if you think about the situational or others, people could be driving in the car and maybe they want something that is a speech to text or a text to speech reader. It could help people, millions more people than one might realize. So there's definitely a business opportunity there, apart from being the right thing to do.
Yes,
so whichever argument can sway, or the mixture of both.
That's a win-win. Yeah, I like it. Well, listen, this is you've been very generous with your time. This is going to be everyone's favorite part of the show. Usually this is where Greg Gifford gives me a question with no context and I don't know anything. For today's show, Mark Irvin is filling the role, and he has a question for you. Gave me no context, and so both of us don't really know this, but he said to ask Purna Virji, how did breaking your arms change the way you do searches? Did you break your arms?
Oh my goodness, yes, that was a big career changer. So I was in a car accident where I had casts literally from here to here, so I couldn't move my hands, I couldn't use my fingers. Like, if you can imagine, like holding a phone, like not very convenient. Yeah. And so I was bored out of my mind, and I decided, being the nerdy person that I am, like, let me interact with Siri and with Cortana and see how I do that. And so I started messing around with voice search so much. And then this was my entertainment. This was like my nerd passion. So I pinged all the poor researchers who were working on it at Microsoft, and they all felt sorry for like the poor girl with the broken arms, and they gave me some insights and research, and it became my jam. I got so into voice search, and then I went and shared that around with everyone. And I love seeing how this usage of personal assistants, of voice, just a different way to interact comes in, and the differences and the nuances between each. So yeah. Oh, thank you, Mark, for that question.
Well, very good. Well, I'll let him know. Well, Purna, how do people get in touch with you if they like to connect with you or learn more about LinkedIn?
Awesome. Well, I'm obsessively on both LinkedIn and Twitter all day. So you can follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on Twitter. And either way, so it's at Purna Virji on both of them.
Yeah, usually I ask that to just about everyone. That's kind of a loaded question for someone from LinkedIn. So I would say...
I'm like, of course I'm on LinkedIn always.
Right. Well, wonderful. Well, Purna, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to give you a virtual cheers and sign off for now. We'll be back with a new episode of Suds and Search next week.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.